All right. And then Sarah or Max, if one of you could keep admitting folks, that would be excellent. Thank you so much.
No problem.
All right, well, good morning again. We are here today to talk about the County Energy Resilience Grant Program. Thanks so much for joining us. My name is Hannah Satine. I am the County Energy Resilience Program Coordinator, and my co-presenter today is Maxwell Woods. Max, if you want to.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, thanks, Hannah. Max Woods. I'm an assistant director at the Oregon Department of Energy.
Yes. And we're also joined with some other ODO colleagues, and I want to introduce you to Sarah Murky. She's our community navigator. You might have had the opportunity to chat with Sarah about this program or other ODO programs, or if not, you might see her face and name in the future. So just want to make that introduction for you here. So our meeting today, the structure will be, we'll do about 20 minutes of a presentation, give some overview on the program, key information for you, and then we'll save most of our time for question and answer. We really want to engage with you all, see what your questions are, and make sure that you leave having the information that you need. So with that said, if you have clarifying questions while we're presenting, please drop them in the chat. Sarah and Max will be monitoring that, or use the raise hand function. But if there are more substantive questions, we'll just ask that you hold those until the question and answer session at the end. Something else to flag, we do have another webinar scheduled for June 25th. That's a Tuesday from 1 to 2. And our main intention with having 2 webinars was to offer folks with busy schedules different date and time. We will cover the same presentation, but of course, different question and answer may arise. So you're certainly welcome to join both if you would like to. That would be, fully up to you, whatever you want. And they'll also be, the recordings will be available on our website, as I mentioned. Something that I forgot to do that I would love to do now is ask you all to drop your name and organizational affiliation in the chat if you're comfortable. It would be wonderful to see who we have in this meeting today. We're so grateful you're here. And also, if you're comfortable, if you could add your organizational affiliation to your name in your Teams window, or if you come off mute to ask a question, share it then as well. It just helps us have some context for who we're able to chat with today. Awesome. Thank you so much, everybody. Without further ado, Sarah and Max, unless I forgot a housekeeping item, I'm going to turn it over to Max to give a little context before we get into the nitty-gritty of the County Energy Resilience Grant Program.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thanks, Hannah. And thanks to my colleagues for joining us. Sarah and Lauren, thanks for being here as well. And thanks to everybody else for joining. We have a lot of information to present to you, but I think we have plenty of time for Q&A, which is really the intention, to make sure that you have a good understanding of the program and then open up for questions. Hannah's full-time job, I should say, is to administer this program. And so after this presentation, if you go away and think, I got a lot of questions, I still want to talk, Hannah's here, ready to talk, ready to be a resource. So before we kind of dive in, I will give us a little bit of grounding on who ODO is, and just a little bit of a high-level discussion about energy resilience and sort of connections to other programs that we have ongoing. So our title slide here, who's ODO? Who's Oregon Department of Energy? If you haven't worked with us before, haven't run across our work, here we are. This is sort of the one PowerPoint slide that we show about all the things that we do at a very high level. And so I won't read it to you, but you can see that we have a lot of programs, a lot of focus areas, energy programs and activities, broadly speaking, but a lot of other issues that are sort of listed on the bulleted list. We're about 120 employees at our agency now, growing and focusing on all the important issues to Oregonians, energy related. Hannah, go to the next slide, please. So setting the stage. So when we talk about energy resilience, I thought it might be helpful to have some definitions, just some basic working definitions. Hannah will get to some of the details in a bit, and she'll discuss sort of the origin of this program. It's funded by the Oregon legislature from House Bill 3630. And we'll get to that in the details a little bit later. The definition in statute there isn't a definition in statute for energy resilience. And so we thought it would be helpful to share a definition, a working definition that we use at ODA. What is energy resilience? And here it is. The ability of energy systems to withstand and respond to what we might call shocks, major impacts to energy systems. And when we talk about energy systems, for us, and as the grant program, it includes all energy systems, electricity, natural gas, liquid fuels, propane, if that's important for your county, and perhaps other sources of energy we haven't thought about. But really the big electricity, natural gas, liquid fuels, and then propane are the big energy sources in our state. And then sort of the resilience aspect, the ability to either withstand a shock and not cause an impact, or to bounce back from that impact. But typically in our state, we look at natural disasters as sort of the bigger shocks. Winter storms. Anybody in Western Oregon in January was probably affected by the major winter snow and ice storm. I had no power at my house for about 4 days. Other things you might consider major wildfires, which cause impacts to energy systems across the state. Certainly increasing in frequency in current years. But we also might consider other shocks such as cybersecurity or even physical security, physical threats to energy systems. There's sort of an increasing trend of attacks on electrical infrastructure, like physical infrastructure attacks or through cyber means. So any types of a shock to the energy system and how the energy system responds, bounces back, deflects that impact could be energy resilience. All right. You don't, and a county, when you sort of dive into your county program, you don't necessarily have to use this definition. You don't really have to have a definition if you don't want to, but I think it's a good idea to sort of give yourself a guiding sort of framework for how you're sort of focusing on energy resilience in your program. All right, next slide, Hannah. All right, here's a definition that's a little more specific, adding the word community, I should say, into that definition of energy resilience. So this is an acknowledgement that in communities, in counties, in our state, really no county that I'm aware of is an autonomous, island of energy systems. All of our energy, electricity, natural gas, liquid fuels, are on statewide or regional scales across the Pacific Northwest. And so, even in state government and certainly in county government, we are reliant upon utility providers that probably don't operate in our community, as like their headquarters aren't in our communities. We're provided services. We have sort of transmission that might go through our communities to another community. And so we are reliant upon working with private sector energy providers or public utilities in certain circumstances to provide us with the energy we need. But what we do control in government, whether it's the county or even in state government, is our community services, community response functions, and what we can do to prepare for a disruption to our energy systems on the public service side. And so we have a little graphic here of a microgrid. It's a common concept for how to increase resilience in a community. The microgrid is really as simple as the ability to provide energy, typically electricity, the ability to provide electricity to critical services when the grid power might be down. There's a little break in that graphic between the utility grid and the microgrid controller. And it could be as simple as a backup generator. And think about a hospital or a fire station that might have a backup generator, typically diesel fueled behind the building, and then its ability to turn on and provide critical functions to that facility if grid power goes down. The common example of a microgrid. Bigger examples might be in a neighborhood scale or sort of beyond just one building. But at its most basic, it's simply the ability to provide services, energy to services that are critical. There's other examples of resilience functions that you might sort of come through here. We thought it might be a good idea just to give some examples, but counties will have the ability to certainly go off and think and come up with your own concepts for resilience. You may think about working with your local electric company on improving resilience in distribution systems. Maybe there's a neighborhood that frequently loses power in a storm or a windy day. You may work on trying to increase the resilience of those electricity systems with your electric provider. You may even think about helping with training on, I mentioned cybersecurity. Maybe it's training county staff or energy companies with increased advanced training on cybersecurity risk. So that could be a resilience effort as well. So that's kind of the opening, setting the stage I wanted to give. I'm going to pass it back now to Hannah, and she will dive into some of the program details. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Max. I had to get myself back off mute there. Yeah, I really appreciate that. So now we have some context for community energy resilience, what that can look like, connections to larger state work in terms of Oregon's overall energy security and resilience. So we're going to dive into the nitty-gritty of the County Energy Resilience Grant Program. So I think, as probably most of you are aware at this point, this program provides up to $50,000 per Oregon County to develop an energy resilience plan. As Max mentioned, this program was part of House Bill 3630 that passed in the 2023 legislative session. And really the goal of these plans are to increase counties, communities' energy resilience. So ability to have critical public services function during non-routine disruptions to energy systems, larger energy systems. In terms of eligibility, this program is open to all 36 counties in Oregon. And the other eligibility requirement is that a county does not have an existing plan meeting the requirements of House Bill 3630 for that plan content. We're about to go over what those requirements are. So if you don't know yet, don't worry, we'll cover that in depth. But if your county has an existing energy plan or energy resilience plan, more than likely you'll be able to access this funding to update that plan in line with these requirements. We just ask that you reach out so we can talk about it one-on-one. Importantly, this is a non-competitive grant program, and there is not a match funding requirement for accessing this program. The application window opened on May 22nd of this year, and it'll be open through February 28th, 2025 of next year. Our program deadline is August 1st, 2025. So now we're going to dive into these plan requirements. The requirements for plan content are stipulated. They are laid out in House Bill 3630, but we wanted to spend some time to make sure, it's clear what we're talking about when we're talking about the plan content and requirements. So the first requirement for energy resilience plans produced under this program is that they be based on and plan for short-term, medium-term, and long-term power outages. Next is that they identify and map existing energy infrastructure in the county. So this includes transmission lines, distribution lines, substations, and energy storage systems. Identify and map natural hazard risks, as well as communities that experience social vulnerability. And this term social vulnerability, if it's not top of mind for you, it refers to a group or a community's resilience in the face of external stressors, be that a disaster, an energy disruption, and it's a measure comprised of a variety of factors that can increase vulnerability, right? So age, housing type, vehicle access, level of proficiency with English, things like that comprise this measure. So the next requirement is that counties consult with representatives from environmental justice communities to identify and map those socially vulnerable communities. Plans need to identify potential locations for community resilience centers and communication zones that the public can access during a power outage. And so what do we mean by community resilience center or communication zone? These would be places where residents could go to access emergency services during an energy disruption or disaster, another emergency. And particular to energy, this would include things like charging stations, heating, cooling, air filtration, things of that nature. For communication, certainly charging for mobile phones. There might be additional emergency resources in these spaces as well. And counties must use locations of communities that experience social vulnerabilities to prioritize potential locations for these community resilience centers, communication zones. Plans need to inventory the energy consumption needs of critical public services facilities. And this term critical public services facilities is defined in House Bill 3630. So that's things hospitals, law enforcement, public works, emergency response, communication, fuel and fueling. And those are specifically laid out as a
Stafford copy versions. I'm coming home, Unicode. I hope you're right.
see if we can.
I think you could say maybe by the end. Okay.
So plans also need to identify critical public services facilities where the development of alternate energy generation and storage resources will meet local energy resilience needs. And this image shows wind power, solar power, but that could also look like generators. It could look like more fuel storage. It's really county driven to figure out what works for your county's needs. Let me go back over here. Plans need to identify opportunities to coordinate and locate energy infrastructure development to align with and support critical public services facilities, identify time schedules, priorities, and potential funding sources for developing energy resilience, and identify other actions and resources needed to implement the energy resilience plan. So you can see with these last two bullets, these plans are really pushing towards implementation. The goal is to do this really great planning and also start thinking through how these projects can come to your county, come to your communities, and make them more resilient. These are the plan requirements that are laid out in statute, and truly they're pretty broad. And within that, there's a lot of room for you to use these plans as a tool to meet your local community, your county's needs, and your aligned goals around energy, emergency preparedness, economic development. And we really, really encourage that beyond meeting the requirements. In terms of the application process, our applications are up and available on our program website. And at some point, we will make sure that we drop a link to our program page in the chat. I know I've sent it out over email, but just want to make sure that you get it again here, and it'll be up on a slide. If you haven't, taken a look at our applications, I definitely encourage you to. We have one for individual counties that are applying just for their county, as well as for cohorts or counties that choose to work together. And I will go over the cohort option for the program in more depth in a moment. But we really aim to keep these applications simple, brief, or getting the key information that we need, but we don't want applying to be a burden beyond just getting that information that we need. So they're fillable PDFs, they're up on the website. Once you submit your application, we'll give it a review for completeness and eligibility. If we have any questions, we'll follow up directly with you. And then applications should be submitted to our program email. We'll use this program email for formal communications around the application, performance agreements, and reporting forms, things of that nature. So other program requirements to highlight here. We will do a funds disbursement one time upfront following a performance agreement. So our goal with this is it's not a cost reimbursement program. We really want to get funds out into your communities so that into your county so that you can access them to get your plan going and not have that be a concern, that you have the funds there when you need them. We can do funds disbursements directly to technical assistance providers if desired, but will require a little bit more information, and that's laid out pretty clearly in our application and performance agreement process. Eligible uses of funds include paying for county staff time to work on the plans, hiring a technical assistance provider or providers, outreach travel needed, and then we have an other category. If you think you're going to access funds in other, just reach out to us and we can talk through what that looks like. Those costs need to be necessary for plan development. We will have two interim reports during the program lifespan, one due end of October 2024, one due end of March 2025. And the goal with these reports is, again, not to be arduous, is just what have you completed on your plan so far? What are your next goals? And are you encountering any challenges? Are there any areas that we can support you to work through those challenges? The deliverable is a copy of your completed plan and your program completion form due by our program deadline, August 1st, 2025. The program completion form is essentially the major components are self-attestation that you met all those plan content requirements, as well as just asking, how did you use the funds, which categories, approximate amount in each. We have built in a bit of flexibility into our program structure in regards to this deadline, and that's laid out in our application. in our FAQs document, but I'm also happy to walk through it with anyone if you have questions about it. So the final program requirement here is that these plans should then formally, once complete, should be formally adopted by counties, by each county, and then incorporated into your county's natural hazard mitigation plan. This is in House Bill 3630. However, we're not requiring that this be done by the August 1st, 2025 programmatic deadline. We understand that county adoption processes require public process that might take some extra time, and that natural hazard mitigation planning processes are on their own 5-year cycle with OEM and FEMA. So if your county's just completed their hazard mitigation plan update, you can work in the incorporation of this plan into your next round of revisions down the line. So the cohort option that I mentioned, in this program, counties can work together and pool their funds to produce a multi-county energy resilience plan. We don't have a minimum or maximum size limit or requirement for cohorts. If counties choose to work together in cohorts, the cohort needs to identify a lead county. And so this county is going to be responsible for completing the program processes and paperwork on behalf of the cohort. They'll receive the funds distribution on behalf of the cohort, and they'll also be responsible for upholding the program requirements on behalf of the cohort. So if you work in a cohort, we have a cohort specific application. We'll ask for information on each of the counties in the cohort and ask each of the counties to sign that application. But once we move through into the performance agreement process, that will be done with the lead county, who will be the grantee with ODO. Plans produced with a cohort must provide each piece of that required content for each county in the cohort. So just needs to make sure that it is comprehensive for each of the counties. And again, all counties in the cohort need to go through their county adoption process for the plan that's produced and then incorporate it into their natural hazard mitigation plan. So resources. We have a plan development resources list. This is a document that has a variety of links and information that would be helpful in the planning, hopefully helpful in the planning process. We have a technical assistance provider list. So these are organizations that are potentially available to contract with for plan development. We've reached out and contacted them. This is a topic in their areas of expertise. There's some resources for meeting those mapping requirements, example plans from communities across the US and Canada. And, these are really great examples of how other communities have approached energy resilience planning. None of them specifically meet House Bill 3630 requirements, but they certainly give a lot of ideas of what that content can look like and places these plans can go. Some other resources for planning, publications, and then finally, project funding and technical assistance opportunities. So these are resources for TA and for funding for actual project implementation. So you've completed your planning and now you're looking to put things on the ground. We want to get you set up to find resources that can help you do that once you complete your plan. And these could also be opportunities you might want to note in your plan in terms of the implementation pieces of opportunities you may pursue. Our website, here's the link. And again, we'll get that dropped in the chat too, if we haven't already. So that has all the key overview information of our program. Some things I want to call out specifically, there's a great FAQs document, it has a lot of in-depth information. We really tried to think through what would be folks' questions around this program, and we'll update it as we get more. These webinars the recordings will be available up on our website. And of course, our plan development resources list is up there, and the applications, can't forget the applications, very important. We wanted to just make a note that in the statute in House Bill 3630, utilities are directed to collaborate with counties around requests for energy infrastructure information in their county. So if you have a utility in your county that's serving customers or operating infrastructure, they're a resource for you. There's a lot of elements of the plans where utilities really might be a great partner and have some great information to share, certainly around mapping your energy infrastructure, things like inventorying the energy consumption of your critical public services facilities. Yeah, so just wanted to make a note of that. And then lastly, like Max noted, I'm the program coordinator. I'm here to be a resource, happy to meet, have a phone call, answer questions at any point. And once you're, hopefully enrolled and going in the program, also happy to be a resource if you have further questions or, you wonder if we might know someone who could answer a question, things like that. Like, please don't hesitate to reach out. So with that, I think I've hit all of the main points, and I'm going to take a pause and open up the floor to all of you to see if you have questions.
We have a lot of great questions coming in on the chat. So
amazing.
I have been kind of coordinating them, and I'm going to play the Vanna and ask them. The first one, just to verbally state it, that a copy of the slide deck will be available on the programs page as soon as possible after this, as well as the recording of everything we're talking about. So both of those things will be available as soon as possible there. We have a bunch of really great questions, particularly from Grant County, as well as John with Multnomah County. Apologies, John, from one complicated last name to the next. I'm not going to try, but I'm going to start with his first question, which is, what is the planning definitions of short, medium, and long-term outages?
That's a great question. Yeah, Max.
Yeah, thanks. I look at short term as hours, medium term as days, and long term as weeks being without power. You don't have to do that. It's not set in statute, but that's the definition that's how I think about it.
Perfect. And then the second question, or it's less of a question and more of a comment, and I think it is worth addressing, is that these are a lot of requirements for $50,000, especially for a county that's quite large like Multnomah County, but also for some of our more rural counties that are huge, that have people and facilities and other hazards that are large and spread out. So I think that's something that would be worth addressing, and an acknowledgement that we get it, and that it is quite large. We're hoping to do your best. And also, I think that's the exciting part about the cohort model, is kind of the collaboration of funds. Is there anything else?
Sarah, I might just add that
Go ahead.
We agree. We know about it does seem like requirements might be a lot for the amount of money. This is how the legislator authorized the program, and so we're administering it. But I'd be glad to talk, or Hannah and I would be glad to talk about how best to, meet the requirements while still utilizing the funding that's available. And Sarah's got the good point about the cohort option to be able to pool money for a little more money, broader reach. So something to consider there.
Well,
absolutely. And
go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, and we are keeping our eyes and ears open for potential funds that counties could access to, help build on with these programs. We just encountered a resource that might be applicable to some communities, federal funding opportunity, correct me if I'm wrong, Sarah, for coastal and rural communities. So, we do acknowledge it. I believe the number in the legislature did come from projections from organizations that are involved in this work. However, we definitely hear concerns around how far this funding will go. So,
Justin, I see your hand, but I'm going to go through the questions in the chat first, and then we can get to verbal questions and comments. The next question is, I can see why the state would like to have all this information from every county. Is this state planning grant opportunity a requirement?
That's a great question. No, this is a counties can choose to do this planning. Counties can choose to participate in this program. So it is not a requirement. It is optional, but really, I think offers strong benefits to your community for energy resilience, emergency preparedness, and other aligned goals that you may have around energy, around economic development.
Perfect. The next question is from Grant County Emergency Management. What if the hazard isn't, quote, natural, could be incorporated into our EOP or both? Would that meet the requirement?
Yeah, so this.
Yes. Sorry, Hannah, go ahead.
No, you're great. I'm interested. I was going to say this, the statute says very clearly that these plans should be incorporated into your natural hazard mitigation plans, as well as formally adopted by your county. However, how you do that, how that works for you is up to your county to figure out that incorporation. And certainly if there are other plans with which you'd like to combine them or incorporate them, that is great too. So I'm going to now defer to Max and see what he thinks.
I agree with you, Hannah. I think that's the answer. Is the statute does say natural hazards mitigation plan. That's where you incorporate it, but that's not the only way. And I think it certainly makes sense to tailor a plan that supports what the county might need. And emergency planning is an important part of how this can and should be utilized.
I just want to quickly touch on John's point in the chat about cohorts, which goes along with the next question. Is Odo coordinating the cohorts? If you had a cohort of 3 counties, you would receive $150,000 total. Each county in the cohort receives $50,000. This isn't, if you create a cohort, it's $50,000. It's that each county that is created, that's in the cohort, each receives $50,000. So, but the question is Odo coordinating cohorts?
We're not coordinating formally in that we're directing counties how to do that coordination themselves outside of our formal grant processes, right? So if you would like to work in a cohort, that's excellent. As I mentioned, you'll submit. There's a specific application for counties that want to work together in cohorts. As Sarah mentioned, each county can request their full award of $50,000. And then that will be distributed directly to the lead county that cohorts identify. And that is the way that we're trying to reduce administrative burden. And I assume, or I should say, I think that would be a way that we are approaching coordination just in terms of you're interfacing with us. We want to make it easier on you. So having only one county that is then doing program processes and paperwork is lifting a bit of a burden for the other counties. But in terms of the back end of what that looks like for you, Odo, we defer to y'all's expertise and collaboration approaches for that.
And then the next question is, are your technical providers already part of a cooperative contract that we can buy off of?
No, these would be, individual contracts that you would be making with these technical assistance providers. So what we did was just reach out and make sure that, adding them to the list was something that they were interested in, that they would potentially be available, that these plans are within their areas of expertise, but we have not contracted with them, nor are we formally endorsing their services, I should say. If you know of contractors that do this work that are not on the list, I can also add them and would love to provide more resources for folks.
Perfect. 2 more questions and then we'll get to Justin with his hand raised. Thanks for being patient. For Multnomah County, where 90% of the state's liquid fuels are stored on highly unstable soils, how will Odo coordinate with mandated reporting under HB 1567? And I think we're going to hand that one over to Max.
Yeah, John, I assume you're talking about the DEQ seismic tank reporting requirements.
No, I'm talking about I'm talking about the law mandated that Odo also produce a report about.
Oh, our energy security plan.
That's what I'm referring to. Yes.
Yes. So I'm working on that. That's my project as well. You came to the right spot. We're working on that right now. It's a little, you can see how in Multnomah County, perhaps as much as any place, it's a little, because we store, I live in Multnomah County, the state's resources for fuel, the sort of the risk and the burden that's put on those communities and the importance of that facility, of the fuel terminals, it kind of changes a little bit. And so there's a lot of programs that come at that fuel terminal, right? The Energy Security Plan, the DEQ Seismic Risk Program, this county reporting requirement. So we're working on the Energy Security Plan for the state right now. It includes a lot of work and analysis on the fuel terminals itself. This grant program is different. And John, if you choose to proceed, if the county chooses to proceed in accepting the fund and doing the work, I think we should talk about how to kind of incorporate information that's already existing into the county plans. I think that goes for anybody too. So recognizing that there's a lot of existing work either by our agency or by utilities or other organizations around energy planning. You don't have to recreate, and for the most circumstances, there's a lot of existing information, GIS information that's available. So the concept would be that counties, and we can help facilitate this, but county governments coordinating with electric companies, gas companies, fuel companies to find existing information that might be in many different locations, and you can pull it together into one county plan. That would be something we can try to help coordinate, and a good idea.
Yeah, and to just note off of that, that plan resources document has links to our Oregon Energy Security Plan, our Oregon Fuel Action Plan, and if there is, mapping resources. But if you have a question and you're wondering if we know of an existing resource, please, that's where I come into play. Please reach out to me and I will, try to do my best to figure that out. And then those example plans of other communities that have done similar types of planning are, again, a great resource to build off. And a couple are in Oregon, which is really excellent.
Perfect. And then the last question, and then Justin, feel free to come off of mute and to ask your question. Grant County Emergency Management asked, are the utilities the energy only utilities or communications as well? And Tiffany had Tiffany from Lane County, I believe, had a comment in here that says Eric energy as it relates to maintaining comms infrastructure, but would love a Odo perspective as well on that.
Yeah, I think the statute itself, it's a good question. Energy systems aren't independent of and by themselves, right? As Tiffany's point, energy provides function for communication systems. The statute speaks to energy, it doesn't speak to comms necessarily. But if I was in your position, I would consider communications as part of that. So that I would say yes, if you have the ability to incorporate analysis of communication systems into your plan, that would be useful, particularly when you're looking at resilience centers and locations that need to have always on energy supply, whether it's from electricity or fuel, thinking about maybe critical, I don't know, even cell phone towers or comms hubs where internet data goes through. They have to have power all the time. And so thinking about how this plan can help sort of provide information and insight to making sure those facilities are always powered, that would be useful, I would think.
Yeah. And to just jump in off of that, for those community resilience centers, the plan should consider communication zones and ways to keep that flow of communication in your community. And in terms of communication utilities being required or directed in statute to collaborate, I feel like it is particular to energy, but hopefully there is partnership and willingness on their end. Yeah.
Perfect. Justin, do you want to come off of mute?
Yes.
Do you remember your question still? Thanks for being patient.
Yeah, thank you. First, I'd like to thank you for extending this opportunity. It very much aligns with the work that we already have planned. I appreciate the way it's structured as far as it being incorporated into our hazard mitigation plan. We actually are applying for FEMA BRIC funding to update our natural hazard mitigation plan. That is due in March of 26, and we're going to be working with the University of Oregon to incorporate our community wildfire protection plan as part of that as well. But I see this as kind of a natural marriage and expanding it to become our multi-jurisdictional resilience and hazard resilience and mitigation plan. I don't know which is, part of the other, but they are definitely related. So I just wanted to make sure, with that, that it would be amenable for us to expand our scope of work for that project to include this energy resilience component. What I'm thinking of is incorporating community lifelines into our mitigation plan, and then identifying resilience goals and mitigation goals for the various hazards. So that would be an intersection for, the energy piece under a community lifeline. But I just wanted to make sure that that would be allowable, with these funds to expand the scope of work of a project that's being funded by the federal government.
So, okay, Justin, thank you so much. I really appreciate your comments and that context. That's very helpful. Is your question like if it's acceptable to expand the energy resilience plan or your other plan?
It's already laid out in the House bill that this has to become part of our mitigation plan. So I'm just wondering, which we wouldn't be planning on using it as matching funds, for the federal dollars. But I guess that would be one question is, can it be used as matching funds? And then is it okay for us to potentially just, even if we're not using it as matching funds, just to expand the scope of work to include this body of work as part of our update to the natural hazard mitigation plan?
Justin, I think that would be probably a really good question for OEM, who you're working with on the BRIC grant. I will say that these funds are state funds. They're funds from the state legislature, which has traditionally been able to layer on top of federal funding to expand projects. But I think that the question that you're asking around the eligibility of how to expand your BRIC grant and the work that you've committed to OEM and FEMA through that grant would be better suited to go through OEM.
Great. I've already called them before this.
Perfect. Yeah, they would be, they're a good partner for answering those types of questions. But this is state funding, and we'd be happy to, Hannah would be happy to communicate with OEM to make sure that they understand this grant in a different way. And you don't have to do that explaining.
Great. That's great, because I know that, the state is prioritizing natural hazard hazard mitigation plans for the use of BRIC funds. So that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, and just as a note, in addition, the University of Oregon is also a great resource for some of that work, and they are also on our list of technical assistance providers, which you can find on our website. So just as a note for that resource for everyone else. Hannah, Max, do you have anything else to add to that?
Yeah, I would love Max's opinion on using these funds as match, and just the perspective, if we have it now, I'm inclined to say I think they should be able to be used. However, if I need to do some more research to confirm that, I will.
Yeah, I think the answer is we don't know at this time. It's a good question. We'll look into that and let you know, Justin. I love the idea. Like, I love the concept and where you're going with sort of a broader perspective. Energy is one of the community lifelines, ESF. So I'm ESF 12, Emergency Support Function 12 for fuels in the state. And so we understand that structure and how to respond. The program still has its own requirements. And so my thought is maybe it can be used for matching funds, but you'd still have to meet the obligations of the grant program specifically. I mean, maybe that sounds obvious, but just to kind of reiterate that. But I think it's a good thought, and we will track it down. Might need to go talk to our lawyer and see what they have to say about it.
Thanks, Max.
Cool.
Yeah, I'll work
We've
on
a-
that, Justin. I'll get back to you.
Justin, if you don't mind dropping your email in the chat too, that would be helpful in getting back to you. Or maybe Hannah can drop her email in the chat and you can email her. Either way, we'll definitely get back to you. Thanks, Justin. I just want to make it pretty clear that we have a little over 10 minutes left, and also that Hannah is 100% of her time is spent working with these. So for more of the specific questions, I would love to set up those meetings maybe outside of this and have more broad questions for the group. John, I see your hand up, and then we have a question from Molly in the chat as well about EJ communities. So I'll hand it over to you, John, if you want to come off mute.
Yeah, just a quick question. There's over 800,000 people live in Multnomah County, and we have lots of different kind of culturally specific communities. And so I'm just wondering around the energy resilience hubs, like I just don't like what's the planning expectation there? Like is it that some percentage of the population has access to emergency power? I mean, we don't even have our mass sheltering figured out for, post Cascadia.
I mean, I would say that I think the goal is to set up a plan that identifies where those potential resilient centers would be, what the alternate energy generation or storage resources would be that you would need to make them functional, to set you one step closer towards being able to access implementation to make some of those plans into reality. There are limitations. It's we're not, we want you to, we recognize there are practical constraints, right? So I think we encourage towards the most functional outcome possible for your community. And, it might be that you're like, we're going to outline some more details on these top priority ones. And then we're going to have a list of next steps or next locations that we would do that with. That's what I'm inclined to say. Max, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah. This cat on my lap, of course, work from home. I totally understand, John. And you can imagine how, a program that provides, sort of a broad scope for the entire county, the entire state may not be able to provide the ability to provide the information and funding necessary for the bigger populous counties or bigger geographic territories. I can envision a system that, if you haven't identified the local community hubs as called for in statute, that maybe an alternative is some type of a broader scope of, I'm picturing like a map that has bubbles, like we need to have a community resilience hub in this location east of 205 in this community. It needs to have these criteria, but it's not yet done. And so maybe it's like a planning step in your process. I think what you'll find is when you sort of get into the statute and read 3630, and it's basically one page of statute. Now there's a lot of information in that one page, but I think you'll be able to sort of see what it requires and then think about sort of the broad options for how that can be applied to your county and sort of to meet both the requirements of the grant and the statute, but also be practical and sort of understanding that this might be a stepping stone towards future efforts with other funding sources.
Agreed. Something that I want to make sure that I get in here before our time is up, that Justin, thank you for this comment in the chat. You did note in relation to Tiffany's question that communication services are critical public services facilities, and that just makes it clear to me that is named, they are named in statute as part of the critical public services facilities, as you pointed out. And I'll make sure for our next round of webinars to put up that definition to avoid, increase clarity and avoid confusion. So thank you for throwing that bone in the chat. I appreciate it.
Perfect. Okay. Tiffany has her hand raised. I apologize. I didn't see it earlier, but we're going to go Tiffany. And then there's a question from Molly and Debbie, Molly from Clackamas and Debbie from Coos County. So Tiffany, if you want to come off of mute, feel free.
Thanks so much. I have two questions. The first is related to Something I experienced in supporting the fuel action plan about 10 years ago. And during that process, Deanna Henry provided all counties with data regarding locations of all liquid fuel sources. I'm wondering if that's updated and still available. I'm in a new county now. I could really use that to get my head around the environment, but also for the other energy types that you talked about. And then my second question relates to scope of the project and involvement of municipalities. So yes, we have infrastructure located, got that. But when it comes to mapping essential and public service buildings, 3630 is silent on this. What do you have to say about incorporate? So county, yes, but cities also. What's the expectation? Thank you.
Hannah, I can field the first question. Deanna works on our team. And if you haven't heard, Deanna's retiring at the end of the month, by the way. So while we're all sad about that, future questions on that program, send them to me and we can help out. We do have updated information around fueling infrastructure. We are pulling it together as part of our energy security plan. And if you want that information, some of it has, I have to check on sort of how to share it the right way. We'll be in, how about if you want the information, maybe you can talk to Hannah or me directly and we can provide it specifically. I'm trying to think of the best way to share that information. It's not published on our website yet because it's not done, but it's sort of in process right now with a contractor that we've hired to put it together. So it's almost available and should be available by July, is what I'm thinking, August at the latest. To the second question about counties and cities, Hannah, what do you think about how that works?
Yeah, we thought about this, recognizing that some counties, more populous counties, often have some populous cities that are not in, for example, natural hazard mitigation plans. I think our interpretation is that the plan should cover those cities. I mean, they're pretty important, right, for the county. We can't mandate that cities collaborate, though we are hopeful. And looking at some other county plans, not natural hazard mitigation plans, that do cover cities with the note of, we don't have jurisdiction here, we can't require that this happens, but we can support collaboration and support efforts. And so I think that is the approach to take with these plans, hoping that cities are collaborative and helpful in this planning process. But I think, the plan should cover municipalities in your community as well.
Thank you. Okay, we have 5 minutes and 3 questions. So speed round. Again, I have put Hannah's email and Max's email in the chat. Hannah is 100% on this program and can continue to answer questions and love to set up meetings to talk out questions if there are them that are specific to your community. Molly from Clackamas County says, what is the community engagement requirement for this planning process? Mentioning environmental justice communities, what are the expectations around this engagement?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the statute says that counties must consult with environmental justice communities to identify communities within the county that experience social vulnerability. So that is the direction from the statute. However, we encourage more significant collaboration with environmental justice communities, with your community more broadly as it's possible, around engaging with this plan, thinking through the ideas, what our community needs. But in terms of specifically the expectations, I think the expectation is that you reach out to environmental justice communities in your county, see if you can connect with them about this plan, about identifying socially vulnerable communities. I did see that Sarah dropped the definition of environmental justice communities in the chat. It's also in our FAQs document on our website. We also encourage, if you're doing ongoing outreach or you have groups or representatives that you already work closely with, to try to parlay efforts together, to be sensitive to asking folks for repeated, interactions. Just be sensitive to the ask too. So I don't know if that came out as clearly as I wanted, but
Yeah, I would say one of the things too, just as like an addition to this program, is that we also manage the Community Renewable Energy Grant Program, or CREP. It's up to $1 million for the for a construction project for renewable energy project that includes a resilience aspect of it. And that is a really great opportunity once your plan is finalized to kind of see what the planning opportunities and construction grant opportunities are in there. Okay, Debbie says, could it be we make a plan to add in the natural hazard mitigation plan and purchase portable large generators for our hub? I think that's kind of what we were talking about, Debbie, is that there's not really, the money here is to do the planning process. It's not to purchase things to create your plan. That would have to be done in other grant opportunities. Is there any additional thoughts, Hannah or Max, on that?
I agree with your assessment, Sarah. But as you mentioned, Odo has the state has funded other opportunities for grants to help with equipment. And so there's a nice connection we can help you make between this planning grant and future opportunities through state funds or perhaps federal funds if we can help match up.
Yeah, definitely. And then the final question, with 2 minutes to spare, says, wondering about the period of performance. Can that be extended beyond August 2025?
Yes, great question. So yeah, we have built in the potential for an extension. So if you come upon August 1st, 2025, and your plan is not fully complete, you haven't met all of those requirements, you can request an extension in your August program completion form. We would extend the performance agreement until December 31st, 2025. Beyond that, we have also potential for flexibility if needed. We really are trying to balance, getting plans through the door and meeting the expectations of the statute with knowing that there are practical realities and constraints that come through. So we're here to be supportive and collaborative, and that information is in the FAQs. It's laid out. It's also in the program requirement information in the applications. So those are great questions. I saw someone just raise their hand. We have 1 minute to go. Justin, do you think it's quite fast?
Yeah, well, that was my question, and the
Oh, yeah.
reason I bring it up, and I don't know if we can incorporate this as part of our application, but our natural hazard mitigation plan expires in March of 26. So I didn't know if we could align it with that timeline. So because I know the deliverable is the final plan. So in order to get that adopted and everything, I think it would be helpful to extend it.
So you don't have to get it adopted before the program deadline, but I think aiming to have the planning work for this program done in advance, even if your natural hazard mitigation plan isn't complete, would be a good goal.
I think there's two things here, is the adoption of a natural hazard mitigation with the incorporation of the energy resilience plan, but also you would want some sort of county approval by your county commissioners on the plan before that deadline, or before you turn in your final reports. Or no, it doesn't have to be in the natural hazard plan.
Yeah, neither the county adoption nor the natural hazard mitigation plan incorporation are due by our programmatic deadline. It's having the plan be drafted and complete, but we recognize that those are processes that the natural hazard mitigation plan runs on its own timeline. We're not going to try to control FEMA and OEM. And also that county adoption processes can take some time, as they should. There's public process. So we wanted to leave space for that. So we'll just ask what your plans are for it, but we're not going to require that's due by the program deadline. But thank you for clarifying, Justin and Sarah. That's really important. So I think with that, I put up our final slide with our contact information. Sarah's been so helpful dropping that all in the chat. Thank you so much for your time. We will have an additional webinar if you'd like to join again, ask more questions. As Sarah said, I'm completely available, so reach out to me, and just thank you again. I really look forward to working with you all, and thanks to my colleagues as well.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.